Okay, so as with hard determinism, you need to know what the libertarian thinks about determinism, that is the principle of universal causation, um, given their view on determinism, whether or not or how it connects to their ideas about acting freely, and then the implications in terms of how the libertarian thinks about these things in terms of moral responsibility. Here, we need to make a slight change here. So I do need you to know the gist of each argument making the negative case, but I also want you to know the gist of each argument that makes the positive case for libertarianism. So right now I'm in the respective section. That's the one that focuses on libertarianism. You've got the leading questions, surveying the case, and then this is actually a good little section to read when he does surveying the case for. Um, it is a good idea to read those introductory paragraphs because he'll do a summary and remind you of important points and whatnot. But the problems with determinism, this is where, of course, he's making what we might say, or he might call the negative case for libertarianism. So you need to know what the gist is for each of the problems that the libertarian sees with respect to determinism in the reading as Lawhead presents it. What I want you to keep in mind is that as you review the problems of determinism from the libertarian's perspective, notice how much intellectual empathy you need there. Not only are you learning to think about causality, free will, and morality, or holding people morally responsible for their actions and decisions from within the viewpoint or standpoint of a philosopher, but from within the viewpoint or standpoint of a metaphysician. And not only that, but in this particular section of chapter 2, and this is true generally for sections 2.6, 7, and 8, is that whenever you see the problems with a theory and the problems are being pointed out by another theory, you're practicing intellectual empathy times 10,000. Because what you're trying to do here is you're not just looking at problems with determinism, you're trying to see what is problematic with determinism through the eyes or point of view of a libertarian. And you might not even hold metaphysical libertarianism, but you need to have intellectual empathy, manifest it and reflect it to think, one, like a metaphysical libertarian, two, to understand what they think is problematic with determinism. Whoa. Okay, so that said, notice that the problems that the libertarian is pointing out, according to Lawhead here in these paragraphs, is not specific to one kind of determinism. So right here, what's going on is the libertarian is attacking metaphysical determinism generally. And remember that both the hard determinist and the soft determinist, what Lawhead keeps calling a compatibilist in section 2.8, that they both ascribe to metaphysical determinism. So whatever the libertarian says is problematic with determinism here in this part of the reading applies to both the hard determinist and the soft determinist, aka compatibilist. Very important to keep in mind as you prepare for the test. So just know the gist of what the problems are. So, you'll see that, you've got the headings for those problems, know a little bit about each of those problems. Here we get the positive arguments for libertarianism. So I forgot to put that in the study guide. Also know the gist of the arguments that make the positive case for libertarianism. In doing so, more fully develop your view or understanding of how the libertarian thinks about determinism, acting freely, and moral responsibility as you look at the gist for each the positive case for libertarianism. So especially this argument right here, and this argument as well. But reading through all these arguments, understanding the gist is going to be very important for you as you're reading through the positive case or reviewing the positive case for libertarianism. You will see information that is necessary for thinking about what they have to say relative to these kinds of things, what they think about, the position on the thesis of universal causation. But again, here you're also getting information about how the libertarian thinks with respect to universal causation simply in going through the negative case for the theory, but as well as the positive case. So the thing is, like when I put something here, like what is their take or their position on the thesis of universal causation, I don't want you to think that this, like, oh, I'm going to find one answer. Lawhead's going to say, here's their take, here's their position. He might tell you what they think about it, but in different parts of section 2.7, okay? So make sure that you're looking at all those paragraphs and subsections within 2.7 that I point to. So then after you get those initial arguments making the positive case for libertarianism, then, and you know, like I said, make sure you're reading through all of this, getting some important points out of here. He goes into a kind of metaphysical libertarianism. And it's really important for you to understand agency theory because you are going to have some test items that focus on agency theory. Make sure you remember that agency theory is a kind of libertarianism. It's not another theory. It's not like you have hard determinism, soft determinism, libertarianism, and some other kind of theory called agency theory. I want you to understand that agency theory is a kind of metaphysical libertarianism. And so you'll need to know some basics about agency theory, the distinction that they make between two kinds of causes. So be able to answer test items that have to do with the basics of agency theory and the distinction they make between two kinds of causes. What are the names or terms that they have come up with for two kinds of causes that they believe are part of reality? What are the implications? How do the concepts relate to what they think about in terms of determinism, acting freely, and moral responsibility? And just make sure that as you're reading through the positive and the negative case, again, for libertarianism, that you are noting really important points that could show up as multiple choice or true-false. I want to point out is that by the time you get to this part in section 2.7 right here, you can stop. At this point, we get into radical existential freedom, or what some people call existentialism, or some of existentialism. You're not going to get tested on all of this. So don't worry about information that is presented after this section right here on agency theory. You can just stop where it has the thought experiment. So as you will see in working through the study guide and videos, I'm not having you go back to a whole lot of text in the reading. There are pages that you can skip through, and of course the peach text boxes, the lavender text boxes, and of course this allows you to really drill down, carefully reread, take notes as you prepare for the test, because there's less to focus on.